사라진 일상, 헝클어진 질서가 지배하는 세상. 우리의 내일은 어디에 있는가? 세계지식포럼.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jiang Li, and I'm honored to be your host for this session. This year's forum is held both online and offline, according to the social distancing guideline due to the global outbreak of COVID-19. We'd like to express our sincere gratitude to our honored guests and online audiences for attending this forum, which is held online and offline. We'll now begin the open session titled How Science, AI, and Quantum Entanglement Have and Could Change Content. The moderator for this session is Mr. Darcy Pocket, subtitled Translator of Parasite. So please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Okay, thank you very much for coming today to this session. I think you'll all find it to be quite an interesting and fascinating look at how technology is changing Hollywood as well as changing just our experience of living life in this world. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the speaker, Linda Obst. She has a very impressive career that she's built up in Hollywood. She originally studied philosophy at the Graduate School of Columbia University. Also worked as an editor at the New York Times before moving out to Hollywood. And the very first work that she did in Hollywood was developing the scripts, which would ultimately be released as Flashdance, the tremendous hit of that time. And she went on to produce a large number of films who I'm sure everyone will be familiar with. Adventures in Babysitting, Heartbreak Hotel, The Fisher King. She established Linda Obst Productions in 1989 and continued on with Sleepless in Seattle, One Fine Day, Contact, which covers some of the themes that she'll be discussing in this session, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging, The Invention of Lying, and of course most recently Interstellar, which was a tremendously successful film in Korea in particular, and so we can hear her thoughts about some of the science behind Interstellar, both in relation to that film and more in general. She's also an author of numerous books, including a novel, Dirty Dreams, from 1990, and then 2 books about Hollywood, Hello, He Lied, from 1996, and Sleepless in Hollywood, Tales from the New Abnormal in the Movie Business, from the year 2013. So, producer Obst recorded her session in advance. We're going to play this for you now. It is a challenging session, somewhat abstract, but I'm sure that you'll find it fascinating. I also did have a chance to speak separately with Linda this morning, and at the end of the session I'll briefly summarize other issues that we spoke about in that conversation. But let's take a look at her video right now.
Hi, I'm Linda Obst, and I'm excited to be here at World Knowledge Forum to discuss with you the implications of quantum computing and quantum entanglement. Hard science has always fed science fiction, and sci-fi's finest writers were scientists as well. H.G. Wells, a biologist and evolutionary scientist, was obsessed with the implications of Darwin. His epic War of the Worlds put Martians in the role of unfeeling humans once nuclear war became thinkable, and made us grasp the power we now had in our hands, giving us what the Germans called Gedenkens, thought puzzles. Gedenkens are the highest art and goal of sci-fi. Arthur C. Clarke, a chemist, helped Stanley Kubrick imagine both AI and the possibility of life in our solar system on a grand scale in the epic 2001: A Space Odyssey. And of course, imagine the accomplishments and crises of advanced planetary civilizations in his masterwork, Foundation. In my work, Carl Sagan, a planetary astronomer, imagined his lifelong quest to communicate with alien life and what the implications of that would be for humans on Earth in the movie and novel Contact. In Interstellar, Nobelist Kip Thorne imagined what travel through a wormhole would be like, and then imagined a trip to a black hole, work that his dedication to Einstein's relativity equations brought into focus, and then his ideas were imagined by him and the filmmaker Christopher Nolan. In fact, there was a first cousin-like relationship between Contact and Interstellar, and it was not me who worked on both. It was Carl and Kip and their relationship, and the give and take, the scientists collaborating and playing on the edges of theoretical astrophysics. When Carl was writing the first draft of the novel on which the movie Contact was based, he initially described the method Ellie took to travel to the center of the galaxy to meet the alien beckoning Ellie as a black hole. He then sent the manuscript to black hole expert theorist Kip Thorne, his friend. Kip determined that a black hole would not do, that any spaceship, no matter how it was designed and by whom, would then be destroyed by the accretion disk as it entered that black hole, the pressure therein being too enormous for anything to survive it. But many table calculations later, he speculated that a wormhole, predicted as theoretically possible by Einstein, could form in certain circumstances and could be held open by exotic material that a very advanced civilization could create. This could make for a tunnel in space-time, a shortcut from one place in the galaxy to another, allowing for that 6-minute trip that looked so unreasonable, in fact, implausible to the folks back home later when Ellie returned and no one believed her story. Here are 2 cases of content keeping up with science and informing the sci-fi curious about the cutting-edge ideas of theoretical physics as they were breaking. In fact, wormholes were outside the mainstream at the time and considered quite kooky by normies, as was Sagan's search for alien life, as well as the idea he long embraced that exoplanets could bear some kind of life, an idea that's now mainstream in astronomy. Now we have spacefaring satellites analyzing the atmospheres of hundreds and thousands of exoplanets in our neighborhood and modeling them for the possibility of life, including many we now call Goldilocks planets, because they share so many initial conditions with Earth, i.e. water, distance from their stars, and sometimes even atmospheres. Now science is another one of its critical crossroads. We've been living for AI for a decade or 2 now, and all the things that Hal could do in 2001 are now everyday factors in our life. Alexa can make our coffee in the morning, pick out our favorite songs, start our cars, and keep our shopping lists. She can lock and unlock our houses, prepare our coffee, keep track of our to-do lists, and remember our song lists. AI knows what we'd like to buy and sends us new options even when we are sated. It knows who our friends are, who we're voting for, and frankly, we're terrified to know what else she knows. My dear friend, the brilliant physicist Maria Spirapulo of CERN and Caltech, has been my tutor on quantum mechanics and quantum entanglement. This is a picture of her in her lab. Recently, she cooked me a perfect dinner in Pasadena as we discussed the implications of this new science. She began by describing a book she recently unearthed by the Harvard historian Joe Lepore. The book is from 1968, 50 years ago, when I was graduating from high school. I know it's pathetic and tragic, but it's true. It was written with MIT computer scientists, technologists, and engineers who had just convened to foresee the future 50 years from then, the far future, 2018, 2 years ago. And what she discovered was that when all of these technologists and scientists were asked, do you have an idea of how all this computing and networking, the internet, how will it affect people's lives? They in effect said, I don't know, I don't care. I'm just inventing and making this stuff work. They shrugged their shoulders about any thought of societal implications. No one thought about any potential consequences. There was no meeting of the minds. No artists or humanists, no philosophers or futurists had been invited to think out, when we have a fully working web, what network will people and corporations create? Is there such a thing called social media? What would that be? What will happen with the internet and information when it's everywhere? How much faster can propaganda travel? How will democracy be affected? Maybe threatened? None of this occurred to any of them. None of what we see happening right now with social media's political and media influence was anticipated. Now we see it used everywhere for creating fake news and propaganda. And its effect on our world, as we know, cannot be underestimated. We see it in the dangerous hands of regimes with no regard for democracy, as we saw it used a decade ago in a hopeful moment when it was used in an attempt to democratize the Middle East with the Arab Spring. But right now, Putin can have all the information that he wants, everywhere in the world, in data centers. So everything can become available in an oligarchic society, whether it's China or Russia, without that society needing to send people left and right to collect data. The data is at the tip of their fingers, anywhere they want. And if you are the ruler of the country and you want to make use of this, you can actually accelerate oligarchy much faster than democracy. As Maria points out, one would think that it's because it's distributed computing, distributed data, etc., that it's democratic. But it actually can serve the oligarchs much better than the Democrats, because the oligarchs can have anything they want from anywhere at the tip of their fingers whenever they want it. So the threat to democracy and humanistic society and thinking is greater. Socrates famously said that if you have an emperor or a ruler, it doesn't matter how they're elected. It just matters that that person has to be a philosopher in the sense that he uses knowledge to do the right thing. Not to do things right, but to do the right thing. And only a philosopher who understands the power of knowledge will do that. Plato wrote about Socrates that happiness is not really a feeling, it's the consequence of striving for knowledge. It's only that way that we can be happy. And for a ruler, a governor, an emperor, that person can instill happiness in his people by practicing the right thing. But without forethought, that kind of an impact on society is impossible. And it's not exactly what we have going in the United States. In the 60s, Jacques Pouzin said that what is going to happen is that science is going to enable technology, and that technology will be used with unintended consequences because it will be used frivolously. He discussed that in a book called Science is the Great Entertainment. Of course, this has also allowed BTS's popularity to travel the world in hypersonic speed, bringing our popular culture closer together than ever before, and our teens more connected via TikTok. But we may decide that this is the minor chord of hope among the major chords of fear that this power propagates. All of this societal change is radically accelerated by the effort for realizing quantum computers and quantum computing and quantum technologies at large. And social change determines content. The point and quest of quantum computing and quantum networking is to fix the problem of solving scientific problems that were impractical or impossible before. For example, if we want to make a simulation of a black hole, or the universe in its entirety, or a black hole specifically, we can't do it in any reasonable amount of time because the processing time using our current classical processing machine, or classical computers in other words, is competing with the age of the universe. For that we need quantum computing. We need something more powerful than the kinds of computers, classical computers we're using now. By using the rules of nature, we exponentially increase the power of computation and the power of networking between computers. the quantum internet. The quantum internet exists in order to connect quantum computers, quantum devices, and quantum atomic clocks, or other quantum devices. So you can do things normally you wouldn't be able to do with classical devices. So the question is again, who is thinking about the societal consequences of this? At this moment, probably nobody's thinking that way, or at least very few scientists are thinking beyond how hard it is to accomplish. But Dr. Maria Spirapulo has been thinking about it and has been generous enough to share her thoughts with all of us. So what are the implications of a quantum computer network? Quantum mechanics has the ability to say famously that the cat is both alive and dead. In the famous paradox of Schrödinger's cat, here we have an illustration of Schrödinger's cat. Let me explain what I mean because this is crucial for understanding. Schrödinger's cat is a thought experiment, a Gedanken, devised by Austrian-Irish physicist Erwin Schrödinger in 1935 in conversations with Einstein in order to disprove quantum mechanics unsuccessfully by showing how counterintuitive and illogical it was. It illustrated what he saw as the problem of quantum mechanics applied to everyday objects. And this problem is called quantum superposition, in which a quantum system such as an atom or a photon, or in this case a cat, can be in two places at the same time, or in two different states at the same time. The prevailing theory at the time, called the Copenhagen interpretation, says that a quantum system remains in superposition until it interacts with or is observed by the external world. The door opening by me. When this happens, the superposition collapses into one or another of the possible definite states, dead or alive. In other words, when the cat is in the box and the poison photon is released, the cat is both alive and dead in a statistical continuum until someone, a person in the classical world, opens the door, and at that moment of the door opening, of the observer entering the picture, whatever state it's in at that second, it is either alive or dead. So aliveness or deadness depends on the presence of an observer, the door opener. If the cat survives, it remembers only being alive. Now, the explanations of certain of Einstein's experiments that are consistent with standard microscopic quantum mechanics require that macroscopic objects from the classical world, such as cats and notebooks, do not always have unique classical descriptions. The thought experiment illustrates this apparent paradox. Our intuition says that an observer cannot be in a mixture of states. Yet the cat, it seems from the thought experiment, can be in such a mixture while in the box. Does its existence in a single well-defined classical state require an external observer? Each alternative seemed absurd to Einstein, who is becoming genuinely disturbed and upset by the recklessness of the new quantum physicists and what their theories implied. Here, writing to Schrödinger, Einstein didn't believe it at all. He didn't think it was possible, and thought that Schrödinger's thought experiment proved the absurdity. This is what he said about the physicists, quantum physicists. Most of them don't know what sort of risky game they're playing with reality. He did not like this game or the implications, which led to another theory, spooky action at a distance. This really cool name for the superposition of objects very far away from each other, which in classical reality, Einstein just rejected. It was another one of the predictions of his theories that he just did not like. But science and experiment proves both quantum, both Schrödinger's cat and quantum entanglement, which is another name for spooky action at a distance, to be true. Now, Dr. Spirapulo, Maria, is willing to take us right into the face of this spookiness and take a look at it. What does this mean for our culture, our politics, our Hollywood, our science fiction, and our content? 50 years from now, what does she see? Some of it is already obvious to people in big business and national security. On the good side, or so it looks from here, and by here I mean in my house today at 5, quantum computers are about to bring out enormous changes in encryption, which will make governments, corporations, and Hollywood all very happy. It essentially will make encrypted information sent over quantum computers not live long enough to hack in the Schrödinger cat kind of way. So that will inhibit things a lot in the fake news department. And from content point of view, at least seems to solve the IP piracy issue. So software creators around the world will be happy, and of course national security as well will be safer. This is how movie producers think. We think of IP protection first. But someone has to knock on our doors with a better version of what our minds are making up for content to even exist. We'll get into that in a minute. But flying in the face of that is a greater upheaval from the technology that Maria revealed to me when discussing the implications of quantum superposition. She became animated as she spoke. So what's the fake news here? Is the cat dead or alive? It's dead and alive. There's no deterministic way to say, she said. The fact of the matter is, when you're making that measurement, you can say whether it's alive or dead. But a priori, the cat is both dead and alive, quantum mechanically. If you're going to use the power of quantum mechanics in an implementation where you are both black and white in your Twitter feed, some of the people see you as black and some of the people will see you as white. So you're having multiple experiences. Think about this. As I did sitting by her by her outdoor fire with my mind gradually being blown. Some of the people will see you as a man. Some of the people will see you as a woman. To some you will be trans. To some you will be neuter, she went on. Some of the people will see you as a Mexican. And some of the people will see you as Korean. Some of the people will see you as Jewish. But it's not just binary. It's the whole spectrum. At any given moment, you are experiencing all possible worlds. It's limitless because you're in the computational realm and not in the physical realm. In other words, no one's knocking on your door to make a measurement of who you are. It's infinity is what you are. When someone knocks on your door, your mom, your child, and opens it, that's the Schrödinger cat moment. That's when you determine to be either male or female. But in order for someone to knock on the door, it cannot be a quantum computer that knocks on the door. It has to be human. This is where we come back to the humans and our classicalized understanding and the realization of the human. We're back in Newton land, and we knock on the door, and it's either you or not you. So wait a second, I'm all confused sitting outside by the fire, trying to grasp the implications of this for content. Imagine each of us living simulations in our own universes, being anything at any moment. It was possible for me to imagine never leaving this fantastical world. So I got a little depressed. I asked Maria, are we each having these multiple experiences all on our own? Are we never going to engage with other people? She answered, it's possible. If we go down the road of multiple experiences, we might never understand what the human experience is. We might never choose to engage. And that's what we call the simulation in the matrix. I asked, that's the video game we might go into? That's the simulation. And we may go into all sorts of video games where we are one thing and then another thing. And it all can become so absorbing that we will never be the same thing. So the quantum realm of this is that you will never have the same experience twice. It will be distinct from one nanosecond to the next nanosecond if you choose to start the game. I'm very depressed by this, I told Maria, and I was. It's very depressing, she answered, which is why whomever wins this race and makes the rules, they better have the artists, the historians, and the humanists to actually think about it and what it means to humanity. We need what Socrates would call a real ruler. We need to have the ruler of which Socrates spoke, and that's the opposite of what we have, at least in the US now. And I realized why she wanted to tell me all this and wanted me to spread the word to filmmakers and captains of industry and artists and poets and all of you. I said, I see. And here we find ourselves now because we didn't do this in 1950. So family, let's take our primary human unit, the family. At breakfast these days, the kids on TikTok and the mothers on Pinterest and the dads in the stock market app. What's the quantum extrapolation of that? We could all be on our own simulations? And Maria said, absolutely. And we can all be feeling we're in the same world and entangled. And in some way our wave functions are entangled because we have the feeling that we are family, but in reality, the expansion of the wave function is bringing us to different ways, to where we feel we're completely desolate and completely isolated from each other. So I asked her, will people be making simulations in which we're together? She answered grimly, I don't think you can keep people together because you can't collapse them together. You can't collapse their waveforms together. You would have to force them to be in the same place at the same time without their devices and with only their brains. In other words, on a classical human reality, to understand what it means to have a child, to have a mom, a dad, what love is. So love and entanglement are the same thing in some sense. Love is wires that are not physical. Entanglement is exactly the same thing, but wires of propagation of information that are not physical. That is why it happens simultaneously. So when information is transmitted simultaneously, it's not at the speed of light, it's simultaneous. If two protons or any bits of information are entangled, it knows what happens here, I know what happens there, immediately, like being in love. In other words, it's saying that if I'm an observer and if this person loves somebody, well then I know that the somebody is there no matter where they are. There is a love entanglement. I don't need to have the wires in between. They can be between Sydney and Athens, doesn't matter. If I measure the one, I know what's happening to the other, if it's really love. Though entanglement is very pragmatic quantum property, when you have two quantum states entangled, it doesn't matter if you take them to the end of the universe. What information one has, the other entangled one has. So that's the romantic part of all of this. But I don't think it will spawn any romantic comedies of the kind I used to make, at least not for me. But somehow, I think, it has a chance to save us.
Okay, so we just have a brief amount of time to wrap this up. Her talk certainly touched on a wide variety of different issues. I think that if we can look broadly at how technology has changed us, in the past 50 years and then looking forward to the next 50 years. I mean, one of the key things is our experiences of connecting with other people. And technology has allowed us in the present to connect with people in a way that we never could have imagined doing it in the past, through obviously social media and other forms of new technology. And in speaking with her separately this morning, Linda Obst talked about ways that, communities might potentially form in the future. But she said that this is going to be one of the big challenges going forward for the entertainment industry. Because in one sense, technology is making us more isolated, and it's becoming more and more possible for us to live within our own experience and to be entertained, in a sense, by our own experience. She described that as being a bit terrifying, the fact that we can entertain ourselves to such a complete degree in the present day, so that in order to form communities, people who make content need to create entertainment that is strong enough and powerful enough to pull us out of these individual reveries that we have. And she says a great storyteller, a great director, film director, is someone who can do that and who can create stories that pull people into theaters or into whatever future kind of distribution we may have, so that we can experience things together. This is something that used to be taken for granted in the past, but I think going into the future, because of changes in technology, this question of shared experience and content that brings us together outside of our individual bubbles will be something that is a key aspect of the future. And then, I also had a chance to ask her a little bit about her career as well, because she's had such an amazing career in Hollywood, and so many of her films are just iconic works. And so I asked her, many people have tried to have the career that she has had and have not been successful, but she has been very successful. So I asked her, what sort of skills and knowledge and personal qualities have helped her to achieve success within Hollywood. And she pointed out a few different things, and these are some things that she's discussed in her books as well. One has to do with how you respond when somebody tells you no, so that you have to, in one sense, be tough enough to that when somebody tells you no, that you persevere, but you also don't take no for an answer. You continue to push forward with your idea. On the other hand, you do have to listen to what people are saying, so that if, even as you maintain the essence of your idea, if you understand why other people are telling you no, then you can modify your idea and perhaps improve it. In the book that she wrote, Hello, He Lied, she says the first chapter is entitled Next, which is basically the way that you should respond when you have a project that you're trying to put forward and somebody blocks you from that. You should respond, well, what is the next step? What can we do next? Not to give up when somebody says no, but to move forward. And she cites The Fisher King among her films as a story that says something moving about the human condition, but had to be pushed forward in that sense. The second thing she said is to have a profound curiosity. She says for her, these days it's science, and you can certainly feel that in her discussion, that this is something that, her passion for science is something that allowed her to produce works like Interstellar. And that having this curiosity about the world is the best way to really approach a career in content creation. She says in the past it was about relationships, love, what brings people together, and she has made many of the classic romantic comedies of our era in that sense as well. A third very important skill that she identified was the ability to recognize talent. And she said for her that may have been the most important of her skills, that when she meets a truly talented writer or director or artist or scientist, that she recognizes this talent, and that her role as a producer, in a sense, is to serve this talent. That she feels this this drive to take this talent and help it to achieve the fullest to what it can possibly achieve. So the third thing is the ability to recognize talent. And then also longevity is a very important aspect of it as well. To have a very long career, it's not an easy thing. Some people find success, but then can't build it into a longer career. One of the keys to longevity, partly it's persistence, as she spoke about earlier, but also in a sense, to stay connected with what's happening in the present day. And in this sense, she cites her family, her children, and now her grandchildren, that having children keeps you engaged about what younger generations are thinking. She cites, her children in this sense, but also her grandchildren are very into K-pop, and through her grandchildren, she's come to discover K-pop. And in fact, although she can't release details about this project, she's currently developing a feature film that has a K-pop theme as well. In our conversation, I was very impressed just to speak with her because she has this great passion for the work that she does. She also has a very strong interest in Korea, and in speaking with her, I felt that she was really sad that she couldn't be here in person to speak with all of you today. But she loves Seoul. She intends to be back often in the future and believes it to be a culture and a country with great potential. So thank you for coming today and for listening to our talk. And we'll wrap up here today.
Thanks to the speaker and moderator for the enlightening words. This concludes the session. Thank all of you for staying with us. Please be sure to take all your belongings with you when you leave the hall. Thank you.